Sligo.
Thanks, everyone. I've got cheat sheets. I didn't get a chance to practice enough. It's really funny, actually. Shane's talk is about being an artist, and I sort of touch on that too. I thought I could use this as an opportunity to make a public confession that although I do walk around talking like a computer geek, I actually studied fine art. So just like Shane, I paid for a private US education in a field with very little job prospects. And you know, I didn't graduate at the top of my class. I graduated voted by my peers as the most artistic and in the yearbook. And I didn't realize at the time that you know, you weren't going to be able to get a job as an artist. There's me in high school, hiding behind some collage I did. And I don't really regret it. I look at my, my school experience very fondly. I had a great time making things, playing with stuff, and I learned a lot about, for example, the development and the transfer of ideas. I learned about history through visual culture. I learned a lot about materials. I really know how materials work. I've cast and painted and bronzed and cut and pounded and glazed and done everything I can with materials that I could get my hands on. And so I think I really did get a very rich education for the price that I paid. It was also a shame I wasn't rich. But in fact, I'm really glad that I did it, and I started to think about, you know, what did I learn in art school that I still use today? It's not so much the details. For example, I actually did courses in the Bronze Age of China, which doesn't come up to be very useful. But I also learned some really subtle things about actually how I work and how you actually get things done. One of the main things I did in my second year was a lot of figurative sculpture. So you may see like a figure like this that's been created. It would be first done with a wire frame sculpture. So you'd have like you'd make actually like a wire stick figure with maybe just a cross of the shoulder, and you would later start adding clay into the most thick parts of the body, and then you'd start adding on the mass where it is. But if you don't get that structure right first, you'll run into problems down the line. And I remember this one particular moment in class. Sorry, my pictures don't really match my slides, and it fits. So I remember the model was actually sitting on a turntable, and her hand was like this, and her shoulder was like this. And I was very interested in the concave and convex curve in her shoulder and the collarbone. And I started working on the sculpture, and I was getting so interested in the surface, and my teacher came around and was like, you know, stop, stop, stop. You know, you're paying too much attention to the surface. Look what's happened. You know, the sculpture's all off balance. In fact, that was one of the main problems I would have, is focusing too much on the details before attending to structure. And I think that's a lesson I still use today. Sure, make first for sure that you've got your structure and your balance first, and hold off on the surface and the details. And as well, you have to be honest to the work. So in order for me to correct that problem with the wire, I had to actually knock back the sculpture and effectively lose all the work that I had done. So you hear a lot in art school, don't be precious. You know, your teacher might be telling you, don't be precious, and really to be honest to your work. And here's another example of a piece I did in a jewelry course. And it was meant to be like a piece of jewelry that would fit on your chest. It was a little bit like, you know, to cover your sternum, and a little bit like this chopping tool that my grandmother had, which I was fascinated with. And I went directly from drawing to a paper model to copper. And when I finally got it in copper and I put it on, it was too heavy, the ribbons didn't hang up right. And I think that that's a typical example of use cheap materials first. Another example here is dig deep and do a lot of research. So you'd go to your teacher and you'd say, look what I did, it's really great. You know, this kind of serendipitous, magical thing would happen, and your teacher would turn around and say, go and do it 20 more times, try it again, you know, you have to investigate. And I still apply that to the work I do today. As well as keep work at arm's length. This is especially important when you're working with other people. Just like the problem with the sculpture, I was too close to it, and I needed to get some distance. So it's the same thing when you're working with other people. It's to not have your ego too much into the work, and realize that it exists outside of you. I mentioned actually to Steve before that my talk was going to be about how I don't like babies. But I do like babies, I just don't like when people say, this project is my baby. So art school students actually have a lot to offer, and they're probably looking for work. So if you're looking for some people who really understand how they work in very subtle ways of how to get things done, you might look at an art school student in a different way. I noticed on my CV it was very difficult coming out with a BFA, and now I'm lecturing in programming. So thanks everyone. Thanks also to people whose pictures I used. So see you later.